Red and blue lights flashed across my fence as two police officers approached my backyard. I stood ankle-deep in the half-drained pool, tools scattered around me, completely bewildered by their presence. Behind them, Karen from the HOA stood with arms crossed and a triumphant smirk spreading across her face. One officer looked at my pool, then at his notepad, clearly confused about why they had been called. "Sir, we received a complaint about illegal water dumping and environmental hazards at this address," he said, sounding unconvinced of his own words. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, my patience evaporating faster than the pool water beneath me. For weeks, I had endured passive-aggressive notes, threatening emails, and whispered warnings from neighbors, all because I decided to repair a safety hazard in my own backyard. The officer glanced at Karen, then back at me. I realized in that moment that this was never about water drainage or property values. This was about control, power, and what happens when someone finally stands up to the neighborhood tyrant. 6 months ago, I purchased my first home, a modest 3-bedroom in Oak Ridge Estates with mature trees and, to my delight, an in-ground swimming pool. The previous owners had maintained it minimally, but I saw potential beneath the slightly cloudy water and dated tile. This house represented everything I had worked toward for years: stability, independence, and a place to build memories. During those first few weeks, the neighborhood seemed picture-perfect. Neighbors brought welcome baskets. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalks. The spring air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and barbecue smoke on weekends. I spent evenings on my back patio, planning renovations and imagining summer gatherings around that pool. Mr. Jenkins from next door leaned over the fence one evening as I inspected the pool filter. "Place looks good with new energy in it," he said. "That pool was the highlight of the block back in its day." "Planning to restore it to glory," I replied. "Just need to figure out what I am dealing with first." He nodded appreciatively but then lowered his voice. "Just a friendly heads up, Marjorie Winters is our HOA president. Lives in the gray colonial 3 doors down. She tends to be particular about the appearance of things around here." I shrugged off his warning. Every neighborhood had its characters, and I had always been a rule follower anyway. How bad could an HOA president be? The answer arrived in my mailbox the following week, a 20-page HOA newsletter, half of which detailed violations from the previous month with accompanying fines, excessive holiday decorations, unapproved mailbox replacements, a shed painted the wrong shade of beige. The infractions seemed trivial, but the enforcement appeared anything but. I finally met Marjorie, or Karen, as neighbors secretly called her, at the community mailbox. Her steel-gray bob and perpetually pursed lips matched her rigid posture. She introduced herself with a business card that listed her personal contact information for immediate reporting of community violations. She scanned my appearance with calculating eyes. "You have quite the project with that pool," she said, not quite smiling. "The Hendersons never properly maintained it. The board will be watching to ensure its appearance meets community standards." As spring temperatures rose, so did my concerns about the pool. What I initially thought was cosmetic neglect revealed itself as structural danger. The concrete showed significant cracking. The ancient liner had torn in multiple places. The antiquated filtration system made concerning noises when operating. A professional inspection confirmed my fears. The pool required major repairs before it could be safely used. The most urgent issue was structural integrity that necessitated completely draining the pool, repairing the concrete shell, and replacing the liner. I filed the proper paperwork with the county for the repairs and scheduled a contractor for the following month. The process needed to begin with completely draining the pool, a project I could handle myself to save on costs. On a bright Saturday morning, I positioned the drainage hose according to county regulations, directing the chlorine-free water toward the appropriate storm drain. The pool pump hummed steadily as water began flowing out. I set up a workspace with tools and materials, taking satisfaction in this first tangible step toward restoration. The morning progressed peacefully. Neighbors walked by, waving casually as they noticed my project. The water level dropped steadily, revealing more of the pool's faded blue interior. I made notes about cracks and potential repair points, absorbed in planning the restoration. I never noticed Marjorie watching from down the street, phone pressed to her ear, her face tightening with disapproval. I did not see her marching purposefully toward my house until her shadow fell across the pool deck. I looked up, shielding my eyes from the sun, completely unaware that my simple home improvement project was about to become a neighborhood battleground. "Excuse me." The sharp voice cut through the peaceful morning. I turned to see Marjorie standing at the edge of my property, designer sunglasses pushed atop her head, clipboard clutched against her chest like a shield. "Good morning," I replied, setting down my notepad. She did not return the greeting. "What exactly do you think you are doing to your pool?" Her tone suggested I was committing a felony rather than home maintenance. I gestured toward the draining pool. "Just getting started on some necessary repairs. The structure has some significant safety issues that need addressing." Marjorie stepped closer, staying just at the property line. "Did you submit a formal request to the Architectural Review Committee for this project? Any exterior modifications require prior written approval." "I did not realize pool maintenance required committee approval," I said, trying to keep my voice friendly despite the intrusion. "I am just fixing safety hazards, not changing the appearance or structure." Her lips thinned to a nearly invisible line. Section 8, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that any project affecting the exterior appearance of the property, including emptying of pools, requires written authorization before commencement. I reached for my phone. "I have not come across that specific rule. Could you point me to where it says emptying pools needs approval?" This question visibly irritated her. "I do not have the specific language in front of me, but I assure you it exists. As HOA president, I am intimately familiar with all regulations." She gestured toward the draining water. "That needs to stop immediately. You are creating an eyesore and potential hazard." "With all due respect, the actual hazard is the current state of the pool," I explained, showing her photos from the inspection. "See these cracks? There is potential structural failure that could be dangerous. The repairs are necessary for safety reasons." "That is not for you to determine," she said, dismissing the evidence without even looking at it. "The committee makes those decisions after proper review. Turn off that pump immediately." The conversation was becoming increasingly tense. Neighbors pretended not to watch from their windows or slow their walks as they passed by. "I have county permits for the drainage and repairs," I said, gesturing toward the paperwork on my patio table. "Everything is being done according to local regulations." "County permits do not supersede HOA regulations," she snapped, color rising in her cheeks. "This is a private community with additional standards. Turn off that pump now, or I will be forced to take this to the next level." "I understand your concern for the neighborhood," I said, trying to de-escalate, "but these repairs are essential and temporary. The pool will look much better when completed." "Let me be perfectly clear," Marjorie said, stepping forward until her toes nearly crossed my property line. I have been managing this community for 15 years. I have seen homeowners come and go, each thinking they could ignore the standards we have established. None of them succeeded. Her voice lowered to an unsettling calm. Stop this project immediately, submit proper documentation, wait for approval, which takes 30 business days, and then, if approved, you may proceed according to committee specifications. I stood my ground, though my heart hammered in my chest. I appreciate the process, but these repairs cannot wait 30 days. The structural integrity is compromised. I am continuing with the necessary safety work. Something shifted in her expression, surprise quickly replaced by determination. People rarely challenged her authority. "You have made your choice," she said coldly. "I will be documenting this violation and pursuing this through proper channels. Expect consequences." With that, she turned sharply and marched away, already pulling out her phone. I watched her retreat, my momentary confidence giving way to anxiety. The peaceful Saturday morning had evaporated, replaced by an unexpected conflict. I considered stopping the drainage but quickly dismissed the thought. The safety issues were real. The repairs were necessary. And something in me refused to be bullied over something so clearly within my rights as a homeowner. The water continued to drain as I returned to my notes, but my mind was elsewhere, wondering what proper channels meant and what storm was brewing beyond my fence line. The confrontation with Marjorie lingered in the air long after she departed. I continued working, though each passing vehicle made me glance up nervously. By late afternoon, the pool was nearly half drained, revealing more clearly the extensive cracking along the bottom and sides. The email arrived at 5:47 p.m., its subject line glaring in all capitals. Urgent violation notice, immediate action required. I opened it while eating dinner, my appetite quickly disappearing as I read through the exaggerated claims. According to the email, I was creating severe environmental hazards through improper chemical disposal, permanently damaging community drainage systems, and creating an unsightly nuisance that threatens property values throughout Oak Ridge estates. The notice demanded immediate cessation of all work and threatened expedited enforcement actions if compliance was not confirmed by 8:00 a.m. the following morning. Most disturbing was the email distribution list. It had been sent to every homeowner in the neighborhood, publicly positioning me as a rule breaker and community threat. My phone dinged with text messages from two neighbors I had barely met, asking if everything was okay. The neighborhood atmosphere changed overnight. People who had previously waved now averted their eyes when passing. Cars slowed in front of my house, occupants clearly assessing the violation they had read about. I felt suddenly isolated, branded as the neighborhood troublemaker for simply maintaining my property. Not everyone reacted negatively, however. Mr. Jenkins from next door stopped by Sunday morning, ostensibly to borrow a garden tool. "Heard you ran afoul of the Iron Lady," he said quietly, glancing toward Marjorie's house down the street. "Apparently draining my pool is an environmental catastrophe," I replied. He chuckled softly. "Listen, most folks around here are reasonable. Marjorie has just been unchecked for too long. Last month she fined the Thompsons for having a bird feeder visible from the street." He patted my shoulder. "Do what you need to do. Some of us are getting tired of the dictatorship." His words provided small comfort as I spent Sunday afternoon researching HOA regulations. I pulled up the official bylaws from the association website and carefully read through every section related to exterior maintenance, property appearance, and approval processes. After 3 hours of detailed reading, I found no specific prohibition against pool maintenance or draining. The bylaws required approval for structural changes or permanent alterations to appearance, neither of which applied to necessary repairs. I printed relevant sections, highlighted key passages, and prepared a response email asserting my right to proceed with safety-related maintenance. Monday morning brought a new escalation. I was preparing to leave for work when I spotted Marjorie walking up my driveway, accompanied by a middle-aged man in business casual attire. I recognized him as Richard Burton, another HOA board member who worked as a real estate agent. "Good morning," I said, stepping outside before they reached my door. "Mr. Burton is here as an official witness to document the ongoing violation," Marjorie announced without greeting. The board needed independent verification of the severity. Richard looked uncomfortable, nodding awkwardly. "Just doing my due diligence as a board member." I retrieved my folder of bylaws and permits from inside. I have reviewed the HOA regulations thoroughly. There is no requirement for approval of safety-related maintenance that does not permanently alter the structure or appearance. I handed the documents to Richard rather than Marjorie. All highlighted sections confirm this. Additionally, here are the county permits approving the drainage method. Richard scanned the documents with growing discomfort, while Marjorie fumed silently. "These do appear to be in order," he said cautiously. "Perhaps this falls under ordinary maintenance rather than modification." "The board has already issued a violation notice," Marjorie snapped. "The decision has been made." "By you, not the full board," I interjected calmly. "Has this been voted on at an official meeting?" Richard shifted uncomfortably. "We have not had an emergency session about this specific issue." Marjorie's face flushed with anger. "This is absurd. The violation is clear." "According to what specific bylaw?" I pressed, feeling more confident. She did not answer directly, instead turning to leave. "You have not heard the end of this. If you insist on continuing this dispute, I will be forced to contact authorities regarding the code violations." "What code violations?" Richard asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "The water disposal violates municipal ordinances," she stated firmly, already walking away. "Come, Richard." Richard hesitated, handed back my documents with an apologetic look, and followed her retreating figure. I watched them leave, sensing this brief victory was merely the calm before a greater storm. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. The pool now stood completely drained, its exposed surface ready for repairs. The contractor was scheduled to begin work on Thursday. I had almost convinced myself that the conflict had cooled when Wednesday afternoon brought the unmistakable sound of a police cruiser pulling up outside my house. From my living room window, I watched a patrol car park along the curb. 2 officers stepped out, checking the address against information on a notepad. Neighbors emerged onto porches or peered through blinds, drawn by the unexpected police presence in our quiet suburban enclave. My heart raced as I stepped outside to meet them. The officers approached with professional neutrality, one older with graying temples, the other younger and more serious-faced. "Good afternoon," the older officer said. "Are you the homeowner?" "Yes, I am," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We received a complaint about illegal water dumping and environmental code violations at this address," he explained, glancing toward the backyard. "Mind if we take a look?" "Not at all," I answered, leading them through the side gate to the backyard where the empty pool stood. The younger officer surveyed the scene with a furrowed brow. "Can you explain what has been happening here?" I outlined the safety issues, the necessary repairs, and the drainage process, pointing out the legal connection to the storm system that had been approved by county permits. The water was properly dechlorinated before drainage began, I explained, showing them the chemical testing strips and documentation. And here are copies of all the permits and contractor agreements. I handed over the folder I had fortunately kept ready since my confrontation with the HOA board members. The older officer reviewed the paperwork thoroughly while his partner walked the perimeter of the pool. I noticed Marjorie emerging from her house down the street, walking briskly toward my property with undisguised purpose. "Everything appears to be in order with these permits," the older officer said, returning my documents. "The drainage method complies with municipal regulations." His partner nodded in agreement. No signs of environmental contamination or improper disposal. Pool repairs are standard residential maintenance. Relief washed over me, quickly tempered by the sight of Marjorie approaching my driveway. She had timed her arrival perfectly, expecting to witness my comeuppance. "Officers," she called out before even reaching us. "I am the Homeowners Association president for this community. I filed the complaint after multiple association violations were ignored." The older officer turned toward her with practiced patience. "Ma'am, we have reviewed the situation and found no violations of municipal code. The homeowner has proper permits for this work." Marjorie looked stunned. "But the water, the drainage, it violates our community standards. The pool should not be emptied without approval." "That would be a civil matter between the homeowner and your association," the younger officer explained. "We only enforce city and county ordinances, which are not being violated here." "But surely draining chemicals into the storm system," she began. "The water has been properly treated and tested," the officer interrupted gently. "The drainage method follows county environmental guidelines." Marjorie stared at them in disbelief, then at me, then back to the officers. "So you are not going to do anything?" "There is nothing to do, ma'am," the older officer replied. "No laws are being broken. If your HOA has separate regulations, that needs to be handled through your association's processes, not through law enforcement." I stood quietly, trying not to display the satisfaction I felt as the officers nodded respectfully to me before walking back to their cruiser. Neighbors watched from various vantage points as Marjorie remained rooted in place, her authority publicly undermined. As the police drove away, she turned to me with cold fury in her eyes. "This changes nothing. The HOA has methods of enforcement beyond the police." "I am simply fixing safety hazards in my pool," I responded evenly. "Everything is permitted and properly done." "You have no idea who you are dealing with," she said, her voice low and threatening. "This neighborhood has standards that were established long before you arrived and will remain long after you are gone." With that ominous declaration, she turned and walked away, phone already in hand, fingers typing rapidly. I watched her retreat, realizing this conflict had progressed beyond a simple dispute about pool maintenance. This had become a power struggle, and somehow I had become the focus of her determination to maintain control over the neighborhood. I returned to my backyard, neighborhood eyes still watching from windows and porches. The confrontation had been witnessed by too many people to remain private. Lines were being drawn across Oak Ridge Estates, and I had no idea how many more battles lay ahead before my pool would simply be a pool again. The aftermath of the police visit reverberated through the neighborhood like ripples in still water. What had been whispers behind closed doors became open conversation. The following evening, an email arrived in every resident's inbox announcing an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for the following week. The agenda listed a single item: discussion of enforcement procedures for community standards violations. No specific names were mentioned, but everyone knew. The meeting was about me and my pool. That evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Lisa Thompson, a young mother from 3 houses down whom I had only greeted in passing before. "Sorry to bother you," she said quietly, glancing around as if to ensure no one saw her. "I wanted to let you know something important about Marjorie." I invited her in, curious about what prompted this unexpected visit. "My husband and I had a similar situation last year," she explained after settling on my couch. "We wanted to install a small playground for our daughter, fully within regulations, proper distance from property lines, neutral colors. We did everything right. Marjorie blocked it repeatedly through technicalities." "What happened?" I asked. "We eventually gave up," she admitted shamefully. "But here is what you should know: Marjorie has a personal vendetta against empty pools specifically. Her nephew nearly drowned in an abandoned pool 20 years ago. She uses HOA authority to force immediate filling of any drained pool, regardless of repair needs." This revelation illuminated the intensity of Marjorie's reaction. What I viewed as simple maintenance represented something deeply personal to her. "Several neighbors support you," Lisa continued, "but most are afraid to speak up. Marjorie has friends in the city council and local businesses. People who cross her often find themselves dealing with increased property assessments or other mysterious complications." After Lisa left, I installed security cameras covering my backyard and pool area, an increasingly necessary precaution. The decision proved prescient when, reviewing footage the next morning, I discovered Marjorie had entered my property at 6:30 a.m. while I was showering. The video clearly showed her taking close-up photographs of the pool, testing the gate latch, and examining the drainage setup. This trespassing crossed a line from annoying to genuinely concerning. I called my friend Marcus, an attorney specializing in property law and HOA disputes. "She entered your property without permission?" he asked after I explained the situation. "And you have video evidence?" "Clear as day," I confirmed, "taking pictures of my backyard while I was inside." "That changes things significantly," Marcus said. "HOAs have certain authority through bylaws, but board members have no right to enter private property without permission or notice. That is simple trespassing." Marcus reviewed my documents, confirmed my interpretation of the HOA regulations, and helped formulate a strategy for the upcoming meeting. "This is not uncommon," he explained. "HOAs often function without proper checks on authority until someone challenges them. Board members like Marjorie rely on homeowner ignorance or apathy." As the meeting approached, I received unexpected support. Mr. Jenkins shared stories of previous homeowners who had clashed with Marjorie. The Davidsons from across the street sent an encouraging note under my door. Even Richard Burton, the uncomfortable board member from the earlier confrontation, called to subtly suggest I bring all relevant documentation to the meeting. The most surprising ally emerged when an elderly woman I had never met approached me while I collected my mail. "Eleanor Williams," she introduced herself with a firm handshake. "Founding member of the original HOA board 20 years ago, before Marjorie took over." "Nice to meet you," I replied, genuinely surprised. "Thought you should have this," she said, handing me a thin folder. "Historical records of board votes regarding maintenance regulations. Marjorie has been selectively enforcing and sometimes inventing rules for years. The original bylaws were meant to prevent abandoned properties, not punish active maintenance. The folder contained minutes from early HOA meetings, including the original intent of regulations, designed to encourage upkeep rather than obstruct it. These documents, combined with the security footage, permits, and bylaw analysis, formed a compelling case. The night before the meeting, I organized everything into a presentation folder. This had evolved beyond defending my right to repair my pool. It had become about challenging years of unchecked authority and arbitrary enforcement that had quietly terrorized my neighbors. The community center meeting room filled quickly on Thursday evening. Rows of folding chairs accommodated nearly 60 residents, far more than typically attended HOA meetings, according to whispers around me. I arrived early, securing a seat toward the front, my folder of evidence placed carefully on my lap. Board members filed in precisely at 7:00 p.m., taking positions behind a long table facing the audience. Marjorie sat center, flanked by Richard Burton, and three other board members I recognized only vaguely from their email signatures on HOA communications. Her expression remained neutral as she called the meeting to order, though her eyes narrowed briefly upon noticing my presence. "Thank you all for attending this special session," she began, voice projecting authority. "Recent events have necessitated clarification of our enforcement procedures regarding community standards. Before opening the floor for discussion, I have prepared a presentation on ongoing compliance issues." Without specifically nomming me, she launched into a detailed slideshow about recent violations, featuring close-up photos of my drained pool, photos I recognized from her unauthorized visit to my property. The presentation painted a dire picture of dangerous conditions, property value threats, and precedent-setting violations that could lead to neighborhood decline. "If we allow one homeowner to disregard standards," she concluded gravely, "others will inevitably follow, undermining the very purpose of our association." Richard shifted uncomfortably beside her, avoiding eye contact with the audience. The other board members maintained carefully neutral expressions. "Now, if anyone has questions or comments," Marjorie offered, clearly not expecting substantive challenge, "you may have the floor briefly before the board votes on enhanced enforcement procedures." I raised my hand immediately. Several others followed suit, surprising Marjorie, who clearly anticipated the usual passive audience. "Yes," she acknowledged me reluctantly, "you may approach the microphone." I walked to the center of the room, placing my folder on the podium. "Thank you. I would like to address several factual inaccuracies in the presentation we just saw." The room fell silent. This direct contradiction of Marjorie's authority was unprecedented in these meetings. "First," I began, "I want to clarify that the pool maintenance project in question has obtained all required county permits and follows all municipal codes, as confirmed by law enforcement officers who investigated the complaint and found no violations." I directed this toward the audience rather than the board. "Second, I have thoroughly reviewed our HOA bylaws and found no prohibition against necessary safety repairs or temporary draining for such repairs. I have copies here for anyone interested." I held up the document with highlighted sections. Marjorie interjected, "The board interprets regulations regarding exterior appearances." "Which brings me to my third point," I continued steadily. "The photographs shown tonight were taken illegally. They were captured by entering private property without permission or notice." A murmur ran through the audience. I placed my laptop on the podium and turned it toward the audience. "This security footage from 6:30 :30 a.m. Tuesday morning shows our HOA president entering my fenced backyard while I was inside my home, taking photographs of my property without consent. The video played clearly, showing Marjorie unlatching my gate, entering my backyard, and photographing the pool from multiple angles. The audience reaction was immediate. Gasps and whispered conversations filled the room. "This constitutes trespassing," I stated firmly, "and raises serious questions about HOA leadership and enforcement methods." Marjorie's face had drained of color. "That is completely taken out of context." Additionally, I continued, "I have spoken with dozens of neighbors who shared similar experiences of selective enforcement, arbitrary rule interpretation, and intimidation." I gestured toward Eleanor Williams, including founding board members who confirmed that maintenance regulations were intended to encourage upkeep, not prevent necessary repairs. Eleanor nodded firmly from her seat, lending credibility to my statement. "My pool had significant structural damage that posed a safety risk," I explained, displaying the contractor's assessment photos. "These repairs are not optional cosmetic changes, but necessary safety improvements that align perfectly with the original intent of our community standards." Richard Burton cleared his throat and leaned toward his microphone. "As a board member, I must acknowledge that I have reviewed the homeowner's documentation, and the repairs do appear to fall within our maintenance allowances rather than modifications requiring prior approval." Marjorie shot him a look of utter betrayal. "Moreover," Richard continued with newfound courage, "I am disturbed by the enforcement methods used in this case and believe we should revisit our procedures." The floodgates opened. One by one, neighbors rose to share similar experiences: arbitrary denials, inconsistent enforcement, personal grudges reflected in HOA decisions. Years of accumulated resentment poured forth as Marjorie sat rigid, watching her authority crumble before her eyes. The emergency meeting extended well beyond its scheduled end time. As more residents shared their experiences, a clear pattern emerged of selective enforcement and personal vendettas disguised as rule compliance. Board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as the testimony continued, clearly recognizing the unsustainable situation. Eventually, Richard Burton cleared his throat and addressed the room. "I move that we take an immediate vote regarding the pool maintenance violation against," he gestured toward me, "and further suggest we reconsider our enforcement processes going forward." A formal vote followed. 4 board members, including Richard, voted to dismiss all alleged violations against my property. Marjorie alone dissented, her expression stone-like as she recorded the results in the official minutes. "Motion carries," she announced flatly. "The violation is dismissed." The meeting should have ended there, but Eleanor Williams raised her hand and was recognized. "As a founding member of this association," she said, her voice carrying surprising strength, "I move for a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president, on grounds of exceeding authority, selective enforcement, and unauthorized property entry." The stunned silence that followed broke when another resident seconded the motion. Board procedures required an immediate vote. Richard reluctantly called for a show of hands from all association members present. The result was overwhelming: 47 hands raised in support of the motion, with only 5 opposed. "The motion carries," Richard announced quietly. "According to our bylaws, this requires the president to step down, pending a special election next month." Marjorie sat motionless, 15 years of unchallenged authority evaporating in a single evening. Without a word, she gathered her papers, stood, and walked stiffly from the room. The remaining board members quickly adjourned the meeting, promising written communication about leadership transition procedures. The following weeks brought remarkable change to Oak Ridge Estates. The contractor completed my pool repairs without further incident, working efficiently to seal cracks, replace damaged concrete, and install a new liner. Neighbors stopped by regularly, some offering help, others simply chatting, the invisible barriers of fear and suspicion dissolving with Marjorie's departure. Richard Burton stepped in as interim HOA president, immediately establishing more transparent processes for regulations and enforcement. Violation notices decreased dramatically as common-sense interpretations replaced rigid control. When the pool was finally ready to be refilled, something unexpected happened. Mr. Jenkins appeared in my driveway with a cooler of drinks. "Thought you might want company for the big moment," he said cheerfully. The Thompsons arrived next with folding chairs. The Davidsons brought snacks. By afternoon, nearly 20 neighbors had gathered in my backyard, watching as clear water began filling the renovated pool. Children sat at the edge, dangling feet in the rising water while adults chatted in groups across the patio. Alina Williams approached me with a smile. "This is what neighborhoods are supposed to be," she said, gesturing toward the impromptu gathering. "People connecting, not policing each other." As twilight approached and the pool neared full capacity, Richard Burton raised his drink in a toast. "To community over control," he announced. The group echoed the sentiment with raised glasses. Later that evening, as the last neighbors departed and I sat alone beside my newly restored pool, reflecting on the unexpected journey from simple home repair to community transformation. The blue water reflected porch lights and stars above, peaceful at last. The following week brought one final surprise, a letter from the HOA board requesting that I consider running for a vacant board position in the upcoming special election. "Your commitment to fairness and community standards makes you an ideal candidate," the letter read, signed by all remaining board members. When summer finally arrived in full force, the pool hosted its first official gathering, a neighborhood cookout that drew families from throughout Oak Ridge Estates. Children splashed happily in the water while parents chatted on the deck. Even some former allies of Marjorie attended, drawn by the new sense of genuine community. As I watched neighbors connecting and laughing together, I realized that fixing my pool had ultimately repaired something far more important: the broken connections between homes that should have been a community all along.